that you have been missing this show terribly during the summer vacation, and we are back. This is Education Exchange, your favorite show ever. And I have the privilege to be working with a wonderful team here, led by John Carhoff and Mike Peterson, as well as our new additions that will surprise you. We have new directors, we have a co-host that's going to add a lot to the spirit of this program. And will make you watch more, and we'll get higher rates now than we are having. Our first guest today is a wonderful leader in our community, a veteran of working hard for the service of the needy, for the service of the people of this community for many, many years. If you have admired our guest for one place, you cannot hide from admiring him in his work in many, many other places. Wears many hats, and his name is Ross Wilburn. And my co-host, which I'm so proud to have, I'm trying to steal her from all her activities. She works for the KCRG TV9, Cedar Rapids, and the Gazette Company, as well as the KRUI, which is the radio of the University of Iowa. So she's a star, and now she's on the camera. You can see her, Katie Coons. And Katie Coons will be hosting, or sharing with me, hosting Mr. Ross Wilburn. So tell us, who's Ross Wilburn?
Well, this is Ross Wilburn, and he is the Director of Equity for the Iowa City Community School District. Ross helps coordinate the district's activities to stay in compliance with civil rights and equity-related statutes. In addition, Ross collaborates with administrators to provide training and assist them in fulfilling their responsibilities under the civil rights statutes. Ross is also an adjunct instructor at the University of Iowa's School of Social Work and a former director of the school's Quad Cities Graduate Center. Prior to working in the school district, Ross was employed as the executive director of the Crisis Center of Johnson County and was recognized by the United Way Member Agency Director of the Year in 2006. He was also served on the Iowa City Parks and Recreation Commission. Ross is a former youth worker in the United Action for Youth. In addition, he was a trainer for the National Network for Youth and grant reviewer for the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services Administration on Children, Youth, and Families. Currently, he serves on the 2013 campaign cabinet for the United Way of Johnson County and Washington counties. He also is a board member for the Neighborhood Centers of Johnson County. He actively volunteered for the Obama for America here and on the East Coast. In 2012, he finished serving on his 12th and final year on the City Council of Iowa City, Iowa. He is a former mayor of Iowa City and has the distinction of being the city's first African-American mayor. Ross has a master's degree in social work from the University of Iowa. He served in the Iowa Army National Guard for 6 years and achieved the rank of Staff Sergeant in E6. Mm-hmm. And Ross was recognized as a Distinguished Honor Graduate from his class at the Iowa Army National Guard's Basic Non-Commissioned Officer School. He is a certified fitness trainer through Les Mills International and teaches softball, cycling, and enjoys playing the clarinet and guitar. Ross has been a member of the Iowa City Community Band, and he lives in Iowa City and has 2 adult children.
Yes, I do.
All right.
So you, with all these activities, you are a musician too?
I try. I've played the clarinet and saxophone since 1975, and just 2.5 years ago, we're always talking in education about lifelong learners, so I thought I would challenge myself and try and take guitar lessons. So I took lessons for 2 years, and I'm working on my own now to play acoustic and electric guitar.
So I'm getting out of the scenario that we discussed a little bit backstage.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any role that you miss out of all what you have done?
That I miss doing?
Yeah.
You know, when I was a staff member at United Action for Youth, I was working a lot more closely in a fashion with teenagers. And I'm fortunate to be back in the school district to be helping out with making sure that students and families are aware of their civil rights. But at the youth center, I had an opportunity to talk more about life cycle events, activities in general. And so I sometimes miss those days of seeing
Interaction.
someone from working with them directly from age 12 up to seeing them graduate and go on to bigger and better things than sitting and looking at me.
And as we progress in our education system, in our social life here, and our community becomes more and more diverse, your role, I think, is more extensive now. And I heard about something with the language. Can you tell our audience about this new program that you are trying to implement now in your school district?
Absolutely. Hani, you mentioned the growth and diversity in our community, and part of that includes people of a variety of backgrounds from different countries, many different countries, and English is not necessarily a language they are proficient in, or they have some limited proficiency in English. And so we are required under Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 to try and allow for meaningful interaction and dialogue communication with the school district as an education provider and as a federal fund recipient. So part of that communication in the past has been utilizing volunteer interpreters, but within the last year and a half, 2 years, we have made the use of telephone interpreters. I won't name the specific company, so we're not doing any product endorsements here, but it's not a perfect system that we have in terms of interpreters to make sure people that are speaking Spanish or Chinese or Arabic or French or one of the many beautiful languages out there. But we don't want to put ourselves in a position where we are utilizing the children to have direct communication with the parents. And so both through the use of interpreters that we've had in the past, but using the telephone interpretation service has broadened our capacity for certain situations, especially emergency situations or important information, to make sure that there's understanding communication between the parents and the teachers, so that we're not using the children who may or may not have the vocabulary for some of the both positive and areas where there needs to be some improvement in communication. And with this telephone language service, there are over 160 languages available. It is pretty costly, but I've been working with staff when we need to have those important communications that we pack a lot of information into those initial communications and then try and do the telephone and then try and have face-to-face conversation with an interpreter. And some of those interpreters are staff members, teachers, but others are members of the community that work with us that have some proficiency in languages other than English, and it's very helpful for that.
Ross, do you get any support from other agencies or organizations in the community other than the school district to support?
In terms of the communication, we do, and it varies. It's important for the school district that we use our resources for that communication exchange, and the interpreters that we use are doing that only, interpretation. There are some times where someone can benefit from some type of case management. A family may not have the connections in the community. They may be new, not only to our country, but to the community. And so there's some circumstances, again, whether it's Spanish or Chinese or whatever language, some of the French-speaking African countries, where they would benefit to have someone to help connect them to those resources. Those are some situations where we've worked with some community agencies, whether it's been a connection at the neighborhood centers of Johnson County or some of the connections at the University of Iowa to try and, where we can, help individuals have those type of connections in the communities and to connect with others from their country of origin that are here in our community, to make sure that they have those linkages for that ongoing support.
Great.
So could you tell us a little bit about the district's use of language interpreters in the Language Line program?
What typically might happen is when a family's trying to register their student, they'll go through our English language intake and assessment center just to get them registered. But there's going to be ongoing, there's certain dates where you need to have a medical form submitted, or something simple like your child has a fever or has been sick to their stomach, and we need to get a hold of the parents to make sure that they know this has happened. What would they like us to do? What's the emergency plan if it's an emergency? Or if there's just some potential misunderstanding about the academic side, let alone the physical or emotional health, then we can have the counselor or the family resource center or some of the student and family advocates will try and reach out. But if language is also an issue, we'll arrange for one of our volunteer interpreters to come in, and if it's an emergency or a more imminent type of communication, then we can have the contact occur through the language line. And if we have the number, the staff member can call, or we can use the language line service to initiate the contact for us, and that helps make a better bridge for making sure accurate information is relayed, and then we can move beyond those emergency situations or just the initial contact to have more meaningful dialogue. And again, it's not perfect. Sometimes where we don't have a volunteer that has that speaks that particular language, or they're not available on that particular time, and we can use the language line for a brief communication. But again, it's a more expensive situation. We're trying to be mindful of the resources that the district has and the taxpayers are paying. But not perfect, but I think in general many families appreciate our trying to take the initiative to outreach
It fills
to
the
them.
gap, definitely,
Yes,
in our
yes.
service.
Mhm.
So, I guess we're going to switch topics now.
We don't know where to start. I mean, we have a lot of things, but let's surprise him by another question.
Sure.
As the director of the diversity initiatives, right?
I'm the director of equity, and that includes both the compliance with federal state law, but also working with our administrators and teachers and trying to increase our proficiency in understanding other cultures and them understanding us.
So one of the things you also do is work for just respect for female students, not necessarily of any culture, but in general.
Absolutely. Under Title IX of the Education Amendments of 1972, we are, as a school district and a federal fund recipient again, are required to not discriminate on the basis of sex. And a lot of times when people hear Title IX, they think of athletics, women's athletics, which is an important part, especially in the Johnson County community with the University of Iowa and Christine Grant being heavily involved in Title IX women's athletics. But it's a much more broad area than women's athletics. It's no discrimination in our setting, and so no treatment, mistreatment based on your gender. I think on top of that too, what we're looking at is some issues that fit in that category that people don't necessarily think of under sexual harassment. Includes inappropriate comments or touching, sexual assault, those types of things, which are criminal offenses, but they're also a violation, maybe a violation of Title IX in terms of discrimination based on sex. And so we're required to have a grievance procedure, a complaint procedure in place, but also we try and do what we can to work with students and or staff to make sure they are understanding why a particular comment or behavior or treatment might be a potential violation of Title IX.
Does this, Ross, does this include sometimes the harassment of gay and lesbian students?
Under Title IX, it doesn't specifically prevent discrimination at the federal level based on sexual orientation, but the Supreme Court did decide on a case years ago that same-sex discrimination was discrimination based on sex. So it may not be a violation of federal law, it may not, but we still have an obligation to check that out. Iowa is one of the few states that does prohibit discrimination based on sexual orientation. So while it's important for us to let students and staff know if you feel that you've been mistreated based on your sex or your sexual orientation, to work with staff to let us know. It's not important for them to know which law it may or may not fall under. If there's some mistreatment going on, we want to know about it to see if we can work to get better understanding. And if there's a violation of policy and or the law, our district policy says there shall be consequences, and there's a range of consequences that might occur. In the case of students, especially younger students, they're getting to know who they are and getting to learn how to interact with each other. So it's not just the compliance punishment. We're trying to help them understand their behavior and how it might be disrespectful towards someone else, inappropriate, and to help them learn what would be more appropriate behavior. So sometimes that's hard for parents because whether it's sexual harassment or bullying, something like that, something may happen. And since it's policy and or the law, I'll tell people sometimes it may feel like something is discrimination or sexual harassment. It may not be a legal violation, but it's certainly behavior we don't want to see continue. And if you're willing to work with us, we'll see if it's against policy, if it's against the law. If not, we'll still try and work to make sure that there's appropriate communication going on, because students have to learn and staff have to come to work, and work and school should be a safe place for people to be.
So when we're talking about some of these things, you mentioned bullying.
Mm-hmm.
Would that include cyberbullying, whether via text message or online on Facebook and those types of things?
Yes. In fact, back in 2007, the state of Iowa passed a law prohibiting bullying and harassment in schools, whether that's by students, by staff, by visitors to the building. And we have an obligation, again, to have a grievance procedure in place so that there may be some type of investigation to figure out the facts, and to, again, it's a situation where if it's founded, there shall be consequences. But in addition to that grievance piece component to it, we do incorporate some prevention type activities. We have programs, Steps to Respect, and Positive Behavior Intervention Supports, where again we're trying to, in a more informal way, help students understand and learn. It's one thing just to give a consequence. It's other thing, an obligation we have to help them understand and learn appropriate ways of getting along, so that they know that they have that obligation, that right to feel respect. But the cyberbullying is a challenge. And people of different generations have different exposure and background to technology and wireless communication. One of the things that I try and get across to folks is, we get locked into the mystique of whether it's Facebook or other some web-based, Instagram, all of those things, whether it's some internet technology based, even the cell phone. But look at the basic behavior. It's still bullying. It's still inappropriate treatment. It's still unwanted acts against someone. And so I try and help us not get so much locked into the fact of that it's occurring over the internet or on a cell phone. But there's an inappropriate behavior. Let's identify what it is. How can we work with that student? Now, the internet does present a problem where, if it's not
in school,
but there have been some case law situations and some court cases where if there's a nexus, a connection that is creating a disruption in the school environment, then we can take some action. And the state bullying law and our district policy mentions electronic communication, and that's clearly electronic communication. So even if we can't implement a consequence, if a student does experience or a parent has a child that experienced some cyberbullying, we've had situations where someone has brought a Facebook printout on what one student put out, and had the principal call the other students' parents in and said, we can't do anything about this, but here's what your child placed on the internet.
As an evidence.
It's just so that they can have the opportunity to be parents, to talk to their child about it, and let them know if this starts creating disruption at school, there may be something that we at the school need to do to help school, again, be a safe place to be.
So what are some of the things that you can do to stop a student from saying mean things on Facebook or even via text message? What are some of the things you could do if they're doing it during class, for example?
Well, if it creates a disruption at school, we have a progressive disciplinary action policy in an extreme case, or one that occurs so frequently. Our bullying policy in general says that if a student is found that they have committed bullying or harassment, there shall be consequences up to and including suspension or expulsion. But there are other consequences. There are services that we can provide. There are supports. There's a mental health aspect, counselors, relationships with our mental health community that we can work at and institute to offer to help correct that behavior. So there are some situations where it's dependent on what's done, what was said, and what might be the basis of that for us to decide what's the appropriate consequence, but also the appropriate support for that student. That's the other piece. People talk about, they want a hardline position against bullying, which our policy says it shall not happen. But what I try and get people to understand when they're making a complaint too is that there's another parent, there's another student. If I were talking to you and told you that your child has been found to have bullied, harassed, the first thing you as a parent want to know was, well, what happened? What's your proof? So sometimes it may seem like the process of the investigation and the consequences takes a little time, but we do try and assure student safety while we sort through what happened, pull all the pieces of the puzzle together, and then we have to work with that other parent and that student again to help that student learn. There shall be consequences, but again, in the long run, the district has that obligation to help with all of that character building that we want students to have for them to go out and be productive members of our community.
How are you receiving cooperation and support from the staff working with you?
Mm-hmm.
Give me some idea about that, because this is a huge task, Ross.
Oh, sure.
And you're doing all this legal part, educational part, workshops, diversity issues, multiculturalism, harassment, and this is a very wide area.
Mm-hmm.
Are you getting enough support, or you think you can do better with?
I think we, as a community, not just the school district, can always do a better job of trying to understand each other, trying to make sure that discrimination, harassment is not occurring, and if it occurs, on trying to help work through situations so that people are feeling safer, and that for those, if there's a violation, that they do get the consequence, but again, attempts at learning to try and get the behavior not to happen. Equity, diversity cannot be wrapped up in one person, but we do have an obligation as a school district to have a staff member or members fulfilling those obligations for investigations and prevention. And so, monthly at the building principal meetings, the administrators' meetings, there's conversations on a variety of topics. Sometimes there's professional development that goes on. Monthly, in the buildings, there's conversations amongst the different teams in terms of cultural proficiency, gender, fair practices, activities, events, things in the curriculum. So it's not just me, and it can't be that way. There's also members of the community that voice their concerns. They try and work with their with their building administrators. There's a lot of staff working with teachers that are doing some phenomenal community service learning projects, not just in the school, but or the community, but in the state and across the globe, of trying to understand, partnerships with other school districts and even the web-based communication with students in other countries. And so there's a lot of energy that goes into that, and they try and keep me informed, but I also try and make sure that they're getting resources and support. We can always do more. I think the older we get, the more we learn that we have more to learn, not only about ourselves but about each other. And so, feel very supported. But again, there's always opportunities for more learning, and if you can't interact with so many people in the world that there can't be some type of misunderstanding. The important thing is, let's figure out earlier, sooner rather than later, that there was some type of communication, or just not even from the reactive end, embracing the different aspects of culture and gender are important for all of us to do.
It's good that you raised this issue of culture, because sometimes like kids coming from other cultures, from other nations, what they consider this normal there is considered sexual harassment here. So
Absolutely.
they get confused, and they don't know, like, it's easy to hug your friend if you are coming from the Middle East. And if he's a boy and you are a boy, it's a problem here to hug him. And so I think you are dealing with a very critical issue, and it's full of a lot of ramifications, and you need to train people non-stop.
Well, even just the language interpretation, sometimes that creates a different dynamic than a family may be accustomed to when if there's one person who's more proficient in English than the other,
Right.
It just changes the pattern of interaction. And so it's just things that we need to be aware of and make sure that we're attempting to be respectful to all parties involved. But it's an ongoing process and learning.
I'm sure
that needs to
our
occur.
audience, Katie and I, are delighted to have you again in this program. We are going to wrap it up now,
Okay.
and I know that we need probably maybe a dozen episodes to cover all your activities, not one only half an hour. So in the conclusion of this meeting, I really, really appreciate you coming today, and we're lucky to have you as our first show this new school year. Wish you all the best.
Thank you very much. Very glad to be here.
We would like you to come again. And the end of this program, as our audience know, will be aired on our educational channel 21. Many times after school board meeting, hopefully we are going to have the board elected tomorrow, and we'll have the new board soon. So you will see our show probably next week. And then we are always on public access TV, that we are really grateful to them for hosting us here and giving us all the facilities and the cameras and help. And this will be Saturday always at I think 1:30, Mike, or about 2 o'clock, something like that, and on Monday at 5 o'clock. So thank you very much, and we wish to see you again.
Alrighty.
And thank you, Katie, for being the star of our show.